Hi there, everyone, and welcome to this webinar on the Go Human 2024 Community Streets Grant Program. Thank you all for being here for this informational session that is meant to support the application process for this grant program. ASL interpretation and closed captioning are available for this session, as well as Spanish interpretation. Interpretación en español está disponible para esta sesión. I'll go into logistics further on the next slides, but we'll allow a few more minutes for folks to enter the room. So we'll get started at 1:03. Welcome to everyone who is entering the room for this information session for the Go Human 2024 Community Streets Grant Program. We will get started in 1 minute. Thank you. All right, one last welcome to everyone that's coming in to this webinar. This is the information session for the Go Human 2024 Community Streets Grant Program. And this information session is meant to support the application process for this grant program. I'm going to go ahead and get started. Just wanted to note that language interpretation for Spanish language and ASL are available for this session. For Spanish interpretation and ASL, for pinning ASL interpretation, you can go down to the interpretation button that looks like a little world at the bottom and click the language that you wish to have interpretation for. Closed captions are also available for this session. All right, session logistics. Before we get started, please take care to mute your audio and phones when you are not speaking. When using the phone, if you are calling in, you can press *6 to mute and unmute. And this session is being recorded. We will save a copy of the recording online. Also, just to support the language and ASL interpretation, I will be speaking at a moderate pace. For asking questions, you can ask questions by using the raise hand feature by clicking on participants at the bottom of your screen. You can also type in questions to the chat box. You can press *9 when using the phone. And if preferred, you can save your questions for the Q&A session at the end. I will try to monitor the chat for any questions that come in during the session, but we will also have a Q&A at the end of the presentation. All right, so this will be our agenda for today's session. We're going to go through some welcomes and introductions. We just went over some logistics. After that, we'll get into an overview of the Community Streets Grant Program. After that, we'll walk through the application. And after that, we'll head into questions and answers. Agenda items number 1, 2, and 3, I estimate will take about 1 hour. So after that, we'll head into agenda item 4, questions and answers, at about the hour mark. I'm thinking at 2 o'clock or 2:15, we'll get into questions and answers. And then after that, we have a few closing slides, and I'll provide my contact information once again. So for introductions, I invite everyone to type your name, your organization, and your location into the chat box. It's really helpful for SCAG staff to see who's in the room. It's also helpful to see which of your peers are here in the room as well. So I invite everyone to type in your name, organization, and location into the chat box. Thank you so much to those of you that are already doing that. All right, as you all introduce yourselves, I will also introduce myself. My name is Alina Borja. I am an Associate Regional Planner at SCAG, the Southern California Association of Governments, and I work mainly on the Go Human program. I will be one of your main liaisons for the Community Streets Grant Program. At this point, I'd like to hand it off to my colleague Jasmine to introduce herself.
Hi, everyone. It's nice to meet you. My name is Jasmine Munoz. I'm an assistant regional planner at SCAG, and I also will be working on Go Human related tasks and this application. So I'm happy to support you all and be here. Thank you.
Thank you, Jasmine. Both Jasmine and I will be available to answer questions about this grant program throughout the grant period. So please feel free to reach out to us with any questions that you might have during or after the session. All right, as part of the overview of our program, I would like to present some information about the SCAG region. So the SCAG region spans 6 counties. That includes 16 tribal governments, 191 cities, almost 19 million residents, 38,000 square miles, has a regional GDP of $1.6 trillion, and is almost half of the state population at 47.6%. So we are a big and diverse region. The Go Human program is meant to serve this large and diverse region. So the program was launched in 2015 as a community engagement and traffic safety program meant to reduce traffic collisions and encourage people to walk and bike more. And this is in response to the traffic safety conditions of the region, in which 1,600 people die every year from traffic collisions. 7,000 people are injured, or sustain serious injuries from traffic collisions, and 140,000 people in the region sustain injuries from traffic collisions. These traffic safety burdens fall disproportionately on people who walk and bike in the region. People who walk and bike make up only 5% of daily trips, but 36% of traffic fatalities. So in response to this, the Go Human program provides direct resources for organizations and jurisdictions to address these issues. With the support from the California Office of Traffic Safety, or OTS, SCAG has implemented 5 rounds so far of community grant funding opportunities since 2018, distributing more than $1.2 million to 117 traffic safety projects in the region. And in 2024, we hope to distribute more resources for traffic safety projects. This slide is an overview of the 2024 traffic safety strategies that GoHuman will employ, starting with this grant program, the Community Streets Grant Program, which will provide grants of up to $30,000 for traffic safety projects to community-based organizations, nonprofits, and social enterprises. This year, GoHuman will also provide local ad campaign support and distribute GoHuman safety advertisements for local campaigns. We will also offer the kit of parts and technical assistance, which will provide support for demonstrations of safety infrastructure using the kit of parts. In 2024, SCAG will be involved in media research and a brand refresh of the GoHuman brand. So this will involve brand analysis and message testing for new creative. All right, now getting into an overview of the GoHuman Community Streets Grant Program. The goal of this program is to build street-level community resiliency and increase the safety of people most harmed by traffic injuries and fatalities, including without limitation, Black, Indigenous, and people of color, people with disabilities, and elders, particularly those walking and biking. Eligible applicants for this program will include community-based organizations and nonprofits with 501c3 status or those with fiscal sponsors that have 501c3 status, and social enterprises with a valid business license. The maximum funding amount for this opportunity is $30,000. The approximate number of projects that will be awarded this year is estimated to be 12 projects. Projects that are eligible for this program in terms of geography must be located within the 6-county SCAG region. And funding will be distributed to prioritize equity. This funding opportunity is for community organizations to implement traffic safety and community engagement strategies. And rather than focusing on the behavior of individuals walking and biking, the Community Streets program really targets structural issues that affect the safety of people walking and biking, such as dangerous driving behavior, high vehicle speeds, street design, and structural racism. So grant amount for this program are awards of a maximum of $30,000. Not that when you apply for this grant, you have to apply for the maximum. You can apply for up to $30,000. And awards will be made on a cost reimbursement basis. So funding will be distributed after work has been completed as a reimbursement of costs that have actually been accrued. So the funding will be reimbursed to awardees on a monthly or bi-monthly basis after submission of an invoice package. So rather than having all of the funds reimbursed at the end of the project period, they can be reimbursed on a monthly or bi-monthly basis. In terms of potential project types, I'd like to present a few examples of the types of projects that might be eligible under this grant program, although this is by no means an exhaustive list. This is just a spotlight of a few project types that we've funded in the past. So that includes community bicycle rides and walk audits, as well as open streets events and safety demonstrations. It also includes the design and development of place keeping or place building features, as well as community capacity building projects, as well as virtual information or media hubs and storytelling efforts. Applicants are encouraged to propose creative, strategic projects that center justice and respond to the program goals and the community's current needs. Here is a timeline for the application process. So the call will close. Call is open now, and the call will close on February 2nd, 2024. So that is quickly coming up in February. After the application closes, the applications will be collected for review and scoring. Once the projects to be awarded are selected, they will receive a notice of conditional award sometime in March. Once they receive a notice of conditional award, they will move into the scope refinement period, in which we will also be developing the memorandum of understanding, which is the agreement that we will enter into with the selected organization. Once that memorandum of understanding is finalized, we can move into onboarding and project implementation. That project implementation period will start sometime in April or May and will continue through the end of August. So other key dates for the implementation and the reporting of this grant program include the mid-project check-in, which will occur sometime in June, and project completion date, which is August 31st. That is a very set date of August 31st. All projects must end by August 31st. After the end of the project implementation period, the final report and documentation will be due on September 8th. All right, in terms of what we are looking for in the selection criteria, we have 5 selection criteria that are all equally weighted, and that includes impact, equity and justice, engagement, feasibility, and cost effectiveness. As you go through the application, you will see which questions pertain to which criteria. This will also be more clear in the evaluation rubric. GoHuman staff and the evaluation committee will also consider geographic representation in the selection process. All right. Please feel free to enter any questions into the chat if we want to wait until the Q&A to answer those. Otherwise, please raise your hands if you would like to ask a question at this point. But at this junction, I'd like to move into the application walkthrough and go in step by step to what the application requires. All right, so the application is made up of these 5 elements plus some attachments. So firstly, we will be asked to answer the applicant checklist. We'll get into what is on that checklist in terms of verifying eligibility. After that, it will ask for applicant information. After that, it will ask for project information. So that's where you will get into the project narrative and those narrative questions. That will also include a project timeline and a listing of key dates. And after that, you will be asked to provide a project budget. All right, so before we get into the applicant checklist, I just wanted to spotlight one requirement of this grant application that is time sensitive, just because it is a letter of support from the jurisdiction in which your project will take place. So for example, if you are in a city, that letter of support might come from the city manager. If you are in a larger city like the city of Los Angeles, where it's not easy to get a hold of a city manager, this letter of support may also come from the city council person's office. And if you are in an unincorporated area, this letter of support can come from the Board of Supervisors office. So I just want to note for this that timing is critical because this is the one part of your application that your organization cannot fully control. As we know, we cannot fully control the timeline of our local jurisdiction staff or our elected officials. So my recommendation is to please request these as soon as you can. And this would be from the city staff or elected officials office of where the project will be taking place. Just want to let everyone know that we have a template available for this letter of support. It can be very simple. And I'll get into where you can find that template for download on our website. Yeah, I will go into it a little in a couple of slides. And I see a question that has come in. Is a letter of support required if we don't need the city to be a partner in the project? Yes, it would still be required, even if the city is not involved in the project. All right, so I think at this point I might share my screen just to show where the online application is and how to access it. All right, I'm going to share my screen really quickly and walk everyone through this. All right, someone please come off mute if you cannot see my screen. Otherwise, I will assume everyone can see this. So this is the SCAG Go Human Apply for Funding page. The 2024 Community Streets Grant Program will be your landing page here. So we can, the first item I wanted to show everyone is that the SCAG website has a translate function. So for anyone who is more comfortable in a language other than English, you can hit the translate button. I know some of you on the call right now speak Spanish, so you could go to Spanish, for example. And the website will use a Google Translate function to translate all of the text on the website. This is a Google translation, so it is not perfect, but I believe it's pretty good. All right, so moving back to English. 1 second. All right. You can see some of the information for our grant program that I just went over. The application will be very easily accessible here. And another reminder that it's due on February 2nd. Below that, I think many of you did register on this page, so you can see a registration button here. I just want to point everyone to the application resources because so these will be very important in crafting your application. The guidelines are available in English and in Spanish here, as well as an application PDF. The PDF is really useful just so you can see all of the questions laid out without having to go through the survey form and fill everything out. If you are running into problems with the job form for any reason, you can reach out to me or Jasmine. And if necessary, you can fill out one of the application PDFs and turn that in to me or Jasmine rather than filling out the job form. But if you are able to fill out the job form, please move ahead with that. Under the application resources, you will also be able to access the evaluation rubric. We'll get into the evaluation rubric and the information that's on there a little bit further into the session. Here is also where you would be able to download the project budget template. In your application, you will be required to upload a template, and it is required to be in this format. You will be required to upload a budget, and it is required to be in this format that we presented here. So it is easiest to just download this template, fill it out with your information, and then upload that. Here is where you would also find that letter of support template that I had mentioned. On the application itself, I just want to point out to everyone that it's available in English and Spanish, and the language toggle is here, so you can toggle between English and Spanish. All right. We'll move back into the presentation. All right, so moving into the application checklist, the initial step is this application checklist, and is to confirm that you would be an eligible applicant. So you can look through the questions and answer them accordingly based on your organization's information. And this is just basic information. We'll go through kind of what that implies. So that includes being able to provide a letter of support, the unique entity identifier for your organization, your ability to provide a W-9. Then you would get into applicant info. So that would include organization name, contact name for whoever we can reach out to about this application, social media presence, if you wish to provide that, and a brief description of the organization that SCAG would use to share publicly. So yeah, please, we will be using it in our consideration of your organization and to share maybe on our social media channels or our website. We also ask about fiscal sponsorship, if your organization has a fiscal sponsor, if your organization has the insurance that is required for the program. If your organization does not have the insurance that is required for this grant program, your project may be considered on a case-by-case basis. So you would be able to note which insurances you have or do not. And then based on your project design, we might reach out to clarify on a case-by-case basis. Project information. So this is not for your organization, but for the project itself. We're asking for the project name and area. Again, this might be shared publicly, so provide the name and area that you would like this project to be referred to. Dollar amount requested, max amount's 30,000. And the project elements that you might request or require from GoHuman. So that would, some from GoHuman, some perhaps from your local jurisdiction. So that would include kit of parts or technical assistance, GoHuman co-branded advertisements, special permits if your project might require a special permit, or city council approval, or the use of a facility or venue that is not owned by your organization. All right, getting into the narrative questions. Let me see. I see a question in the chat. All right, so getting LA City Council attention is very difficult. Yes, if I would encourage anyone who does not have an existing relationship with their local city manager or city council office or board of supervisors, whoever it might be, that would be most appropriate to answer the letter of support request. I would encourage you to reach out to me and Jasmine to see if there's any SCAG relationship that we might be able to leverage in order to make that introduction and get that letter of support for you. My project would cross 2 city council districts. Do I need a letter of support from both? I believe 1 is sufficient. We only require 1. Yeah, I might get back to you on that, but so far as I understand it, we only require 1 letter of support. All right, moving into the narrative question portion of the application. So we start off asking about the context for your project. So we'd like you to describe the communities that will be served by the project and how this project will be tailored to serve the communities that you are describing. Then we'll ask you to get into describing the traffic safety needs specific to that community. So a couple of tips for success on how to answer those context questions. And this information, I'll go through some of these tips for success on the questions. But all of this information will be laid out in a clear way on the evaluation rubric. So again, just going back to that evaluation rubric, I highly suggest reading through the guidelines before responding to the questions in the application and going through the evaluation rubric as you respond to the questions and craft your reply. So tips for the context section include making a strong and specific connection between the project design and the proposed project to the people most harmed by traffic injuries and fatalities in the community that you're describing, and as relate to the Go Human program goals. As well as clearly identifying the safety concerns connected to the program goal of increasing the safety of people most harmed by traffic injuries and fatalities. Then in the narrative questions, we will get into the proposed project. So this includes a question about the specific actions that you will take to implement your project. So clear breakdown of what exactly the work will entail. We also want to know about anticipated objectives and outcomes, as well as how you will track those anticipated objectives and outcomes. So the evaluation portion of your project. And we also ask about which strategies and specific steps you will take to reach the audiences that you proposed for your project. Couple of tips for success on those questions. So detailing a robust and creative approach for addressing the traffic safety issues of your target community and for reaching that audience. And also providing clear objectives and outcomes that strongly align with the program goals. So again, anytime we reference program goals, please refer back to the program guidelines. That is where they are most clearly laid out. For this section as well, it would help to include equitable and/or participatory methods of determining the success of your project and that evaluation, and thoughtfully positioning the project to strategically build on existing. Okay, I'm going to repeat that last question because I think I cut out for a second. But yeah, thoughtfully positioning the project to strategically build on existing community resources and needs. Another part of the narrative questions, we'll get into the qualifications and feasibility of your organization and your project. So in these questions, we will ask about your organization's experience in carrying out similar projects and your organization's experience within the community in which you're proposing the project. So really explaining those community connections. We'll ask about an implementation strategy for the feasibility of your project implementation. And as part of that question, to please include key dates that will be part of your project. So tips for success on those qualification questions, demonstrating experience with similar projects, speaking to qualifications that can address traffic safety in the target area, and explaining an authentic relationship to the target populations in that community. So detailing a plan that can be implemented within the implementation period. So given that this project implementation period begins in April or May, and the hard deadline being on August 31st, your implementation period is about 4 months. And identifying resources and/or partnerships that can support the work is very helpful. All right. So in crafting these responses, I highly suggest taking a look at the evaluation rubric. The evaluation rubric lists the questions that are included in the application, as well as their point value, the criteria that they will be judged under, the word limit, and the section that they are presented in. This evaluation rubric goes through what type of response would score low, medium, or high on our point system that the evaluators will use. So for example, in describing the primary safety needs or issues of the project, if an applicant response does not clearly identify a safety concern, they would score low on that question, whereas if they provided very specific and robust identification of the concerns of that specific community and it related to our program goals of addressing traffic safety for the people most harmed by traffic injuries, then it would score high on the rubric. So yeah, this cut off a little bit, but please download that evaluation rubric. And that's available on our website. All right, so getting into the budget portion of this application and some of the eligible expenses that would be part of that. So I'll start with eligible expenses and then we can get into ineligible expenses. But expenses as part of this project should be directly related to what you are proposing in the narrative, including but not exclusive to labor costs, such as coordination, design, facilitation, setup, training, etc. Yeah, so labor costs can be part of it. Printing, permits or fees that are related to the project can be included as eligible expenses. Bicycle helmets, if they are purchased in support of bicycle education. So these in particular, when you're crafting the budget, please keep in mind that we have a budget cap for how much bicycle helmets can cost, and that should be no more than $15 per unit. That includes taxes and fees. So please keep that in mind if you included bicycle helmets in your budget. Supply or equipment rental fees are eligible. And virtual platform subscription fees, as long as they are prorated to just cover your project period. So for example, we would not pay for like a year subscription if your project, because your project is only taking place in the summer, the four months of the project implementation period. All right, getting into ineligible expenses. Ineligible expenses include, but are not limited to, products or giveaways that are not tied specifically to a safety educational component. So they would only be allowed if they are given away in direct correlation with safety education. So most products, giveaways, most type of like swag or incentives would not be eligible under this grant. So that includes things that are like indirectly related to safety, such as first aid kits or knee pads. Some of the items that would be eligible as like a giveaway in connection to safety education are helmets. Stickers are not eligible under this grant. So bumper stickers or stickers for any sort of mass distribution at an event are not eligible. Raffle prizes are not eligible. Food or beverages, so that includes water, are not eligible. Office furniture purchases are not eligible. Paint, chalk, plants, event entertainment or music are not eligible. And advertising that is not directly related to the proposed project would not be eligible under this grant. All right, a few more. I believe this is the last slide for ineligible expenses, but this grant can also not cover permanent or quick build infrastructure improvements, the implementation of a study plan or program, habitat conservation plans, lobbying efforts and or political contributions, and items that are not indicated in the original project budget. So please consider that in your program design as you're applying for this and the design of your project budget, that items that are not indicated in your application will not be able to be covered later on. All right, so a template for the project budget is available online, as I had shown a little while ago. Please download that, fill it out with your information, and then upload that to the application.
Polina?
Yes, hello.
Hi, there is a question in the chat related to the eligible expenses that just came up.
Thank you so much. All right. So it seems that bicyclist education would not be eligible for this grant since the grant description talks about focusing on structural issues and not on the behaviors of bicyclists and pedestrians. Is this an accurate reading of the description? I think there would be a lot of flexibility in that. I think bicyclists and pedestrian education would be eligible under this grant program, as long as it strongly connects to the program goals that like do focus on the structural issues. So pedestrian and bicyclist education, as long as it doesn't like, I guess, as long as it's like in service of larger improvements. Does that make sense? And I think it would be like really, this particular question, I think would be really flexible in the program design, as long as it connects to our program goals. All right, I hope that wasn't more confusing. All right. Yes, okay, so this is what our project budget template looks like. It is set up to help you plan the amount of time that you would need to complete a project. So particularly in the direct labor, it asks for the hourly rate of the employees that would be included here, and the number of hours, and then it would automatically calculate that labor cost for you. So the direct labor classification section is where you would indicate the folks on your payroll. So the organization payroll, whoever would be paid through that pay register for this project specifically can be placed here. Underneath the direct labor classification, you'll see other direct costs, or ODCs as we call them. This is where you would place any contract or 1099 labor that might be part of this budget. That is also where you would place materials that are eligible under the grant. For example, vehicle rentals, venue rentals, subscription fees, helmets, etc. So the project budget template comes with instructions under the Read Me tab. So please read those before starting and follow those as closely as you can. You can list the job titles of all the staff under the direct labor section. And we would like you to list the titles and not the names so that we can match it up to the payroll or like the pay stubs that you would provide. You would list the hourly rate for each staff. And you must provide support for the hourly rate with documentation. So this documentation would look like a payroll register or pay stubs. And then you would enter the number of hours, and the spreadsheet automatically calculates that for you. All right, so direct costs, hard costs such as printing, permit costs, bicycle helmets, equipment rentals, that would go under the other direct costs. It can also include services such as photography and videography. Yeah, you would enter amounts for the direct costs into the budget. And after entering those hourly rates, labor hours, and direct costs, the budget spreadsheet will automatically calculate that grand total. And that would be the number this number would be your proposed budget for the project. All right, let me look at some of the questions that have come in the chat. What kinds of programs are implied if program implementation is not eligible? This is confusing. Just about any program proposal can be defined as a program. Okay, so I think I think we're referring to one of the listed items under the ineligible, under the ineligible costs. So what we mean by implementation is like a capital improvement. So like the installation or implementation of something like a speed bump or a quick build. So that type of like implementation of a plan or capital improvement would not be eligible under this grant. But program, so like the community engagement program that you would design, the implementation of that would be eligible. So yes, sorry about the wording on that. And if that didn't answer the question, yes, we can definitely get into it in the Q&A section. And going down to one of the other questions, one of the potential project types, design and placekeeping features with art designs. Yes, ineligible expenses include quick build and permanent improvements. Can you clarify the difference between the two? Yes, okay, so one of the potential project types that we listed is design and development of placekeeping features, such as art designs. So this grant program would be able to cover the design and development of those place building or placekeeping features. For example, the labor of the artists to design those features, or the coordination labor with whoever owns the bus benches to coordinate the permissions for that. So this grant would be able to cover that. What it would not be able to cover is like the paint or the actual bus bench itself. I hope that clears that up a little bit. And how current must pay stubs be? Oh, that's a really good question. I'm gonna keep that one for the Q&A, and then hand it over to one of my colleagues from the Budgets and Grants team who is present. So we'll keep that question for the Q&A. All right, so budget supporting documentation must provide supporting documentation for the direct labor that is included in the budget. So yes, this includes pay stubs. We'll answer that question about how current they must be later in the Q&A. All right, so this application also requires you to attach a couple of items. So we went through all of them already. So the required attachments include the budget. So please use the budget template that we provided, the supporting documentation for the labor hours, and the letter of support. We do not need to use our template for that, but we provided it for your convenience. It can be very simple. And any other additional materials that might be necessary for your application. And yes, the templates for most of these are available on the website. All right, so now we can get into the questions and answers. I will invite my colleague Tim from the Budgets and Grants team to maybe try to answer this question from Art about how current the pay stubs might be.
Sure. Hello, everyone. Yeah, so for the current pay stubs, it would be great if everyone could just provide maybe within a couple weeks of whenever you submit the application of the pay stub that's just most recent when you submit the application, that'd be great. But I would for sure just say whatever is their current pay rate is just what we need to know. So and take that how you would like, but definitely just the most recent one as close as you can to application submittal. That'd be good.
All right, looking into the Q&A. So I see a question here. Can the letter of support be from the director's staff from planning or public works departments. We would prefer the letter of support to come from the three entities that we had listed, so the city manager, the board of supervisors, or the city council member, depending on where you are holding the project. And if you need like an introduction or like a facilitation of that request from SCAG staff, we can provide that. If that is not possible within the application period, I think we can talk about, yeah, the alternatives of maybe asking it from the city staff. All right, any other questions? You can raise your hands or type it into the chat. Oh, sorry, I think I see a question that I had missed earlier. So one organization has no payroll, only contractors. What form of documentation is needed to support the hourly rate of the contractors being proposed on the Go Human project if this organization is picked? So that is a great question. So those contractors would be listed under the other direct costs, and the documentation that you can provide for that is an invoice of the total work that will be provided, so the total labor hours that will be provided for the grant, for the program, for the project. And that invoice should include the number of hours that are going to be worked and the hourly rate. All right, some applicants may be retired, but have extensive experience and were once paid at a high rate. If they pay themselves for hire now, they would command that rate. Pay stub, follow-up question. I don't know if I understood the question. Art, would you mind reiterating it? Oh, if they put themselves for hire now, would command that rate. Right, I might ask, yeah, hi.
Hi, no, it's just Tim. I was just gonna tell Art, if they're just, we just need the current pay stub of whatever the rate is that they're asking. So, if they're asking for the higher rate, we just need it to make sure it matches that rate. I think that answers your question, but just make sure the pay stub matches whatever's on the budget.
Thank you, Tim. All right, I see another question here about the letter of support. Yeah, again, I think we would prefer the three entities that we had listed, but if there's another city official, you might be able to provide like an example of what that city official might be. I think I can kind of send it up to my colleagues to see if that would still be acceptable or not. And for Faye, who asked that question, yeah, if you could put in the chat, Director of Office Sustainability. Okay, I can ask about that, but I think when I asked about this, we were directed that it is much preferable to have the city manager, the elected council, like people's office, or the Board of Supervisors office. All right, I see another question. Can we provide invoices for each of the contractors or past invoices for each of the contractors? Does that suffice? Tim, I might ask you to hop in for this question as well from Caitlin.
Sure. We'd prefer the current one. For whatever maybe they're doing the work for this project this year. Past invoices may be a little outdated, so we'd much prefer a current one.
All right, can you tell us a little about how equity is being evaluated? Are you assigning priority to projects in communities that are low income and underserved. Yes, and I believe the program guidelines would truly have the answer to how like equity would be evaluated. So in the guidelines, we link to the Racial Equity Early Action Plan from SCAG. And we are really taking we're taking the guidance from that Racial Equity Early Action Plan on how to evaluate equity within these applications. So yes, the projects will be evaluated to prioritize underserved communities. And as our program guidelines say, communities and people who are most harmed by traffic injuries and fatalities. So that usually tends to overlap with kind of the communities you described here in the question. Okay, another question. Si no apoyamos con un patrocinador, el 10%. Okay, so if you don't have a fiscal sponsor, the 10% for the administrative costs that would be used for the sponsor. Does that include insurance that the fiscal sponsor would use? Include lessons in the okay, so let's see, this question from Elizabeth, I think says, would the 10% administrative fee that is eligible under this grant be able to be used for insurance costs for the fiscal sponsor? Is that correct? Let me see. Okay, and okay, I don't know if my colleague Andres is on the line, but I think Andres, you had a little bit more experience with covering insurance. Do you know if the 10% de minimis might be able to cover insurance and fiscal sponsor costs?
I think, Lena, just want to make sure you can hear me.
Yes, I can hear you.
Okay, the insurance is not an eligible cost, and that 10% is very, very likely would not be able to cover insurance. I think, as with all insurances, it can evaluate it on a case by case basis, but insurance is not an eligible cost wherever it is placed in the budget. That 10% de minimis cost is, or the 10% kind of rate, it can cover the fiscal sponsor fee, but you can't include the 10% and your fiscal sponsor fee. So if you have a fiscal sponsor and want to include that cost in the budget, you should reach out to Alina and Jasmine to find out more. But I think the kind of the rule of thumb is that you can't include both.
And thank you, Andres, for clarifying that. And Tim, please let us know if there's anything to add to that. That sounded like it answered the question.
Yeah, no, that was great. Thank you, Andres.
Thank you. All right, I see another great question here. What determines whether grantees are being paid monthly or bi-monthly? So that will be up to the awardee's discretion, I think. So I think SCAG will provide the option to be paid and to ask for invoices monthly or bi-monthly. We made this update to the program design based on feedback that we had heard that it is very difficult to provide all of the costs upfront and wait until the very end of the project period to be paid. So we're hoping to provide the option to be paid monthly or bi-monthly. We also recognize that it is a lot of work to put together the invoice packages that SCAG requires. So we're providing the option of doing a monthly or bi-monthly invoicing process. So that will be up to the grantee. All right. Looking in the chat for any other questions. Not seeing any questions in the Q&A. All right. Thank you everyone for those fantastic questions. And I'll provide my and Jasmine's contact information towards the end. I have a couple more slides as well. So if you do come up with any more questions, you can always email me or email Jasmine. All right. And if there's any other questions that come up the next couple of slides, please put them in the chat. But I did want to wrap up by presenting some of the other opportunities that GoHuman provides. So we provide co-branded safety messaging materials at no cost, in which GoHuman will co-brand, print, and ship the materials to the partner. And this resource is available to organizations and jurisdictions in the SCAG region at no cost, and regardless of whether or not you receive a Community Streets grant, regardless of whether you even apply to the Community Streets grant, this is a separate resource that is available to you. So you can request lawn signs, banners, bus shelter ads, postcards, digital requests, or digital media, and custom requests. Thank you, Jasmine, for putting the link to the request page in the chat. So you can request these materials now, and we will have resources to fulfill the print materials requests starting in the spring of 2024. Yes, and the materials request form is online on our website at the link that Jasmine provided in the chat. Another resource that is available to you all, regardless of whether or not you apply to this grant, is the kit of parts. The kit of parts is a set of lightweight and durable materials that can be used to set up a temporary demonstration of different elements, such as a bike lane, a parklet, an artistic crosswalk, a median refuge island, and a curb extension. It comes with educational signage and can be used together with other resources like the Community Streets grant or the co-branded advertisement materials. So this is available year-round for requests. And finally, here is my contact information again, as well as Jasmine's contact information. Please reach out with any questions. And I also wanted to remind everyone that there will be a final opportunity for live application support on January 23rd. It will be in office hours, so a more informal application support session where it'll just be me and Jasmine in a Zoom room answering any questions that might come up on January 23rd. From 4 to 6 p.m. You can register in the same place where you registered for this webinar. Thank you, everyone. Thank you, everyone, for being here. We are done. Yes.
Thank you for everything. It was very informative. I look forward to applying for this great opportunity.
Thank you so much for being here.